Good morning, I'm Bandula Jayasekara. My friend and colleague Faraz Shaukat Ali is on a long vacation. He'll be back in October. Now the newspapers reports that the Sri Lankan cricketer Nuwan Kulasekara was arrested over a fatal accident and he was granted bail. But my question is, now yesterday I saw on tweets and other reports where Sri Lankan cricket had issued the statement. Why should Sri Lankan cricket issue a statement? Here, Kulasekara met with an accident as a normal person, as ordinary Sri Lankan. That has got nothing to do with cricket. But how come the Sri Lankan cricket issue statements? What happens if the others, ordinary people, we meet with accidents every day? So that's a question I have. So we got to think, some time ago also, I think in Kadawat area, another cricketer met with an accident. I think that person was killed. But we have to empower the masses. We don't need these trappings. And there's another member of the joint opposition, his Rohit Abegunathan, his nephew had met with an accident, a 17-year-old boy, and he was driving a sports car where two could go, but there were 5 going on. So let's get away with the power thing, and let's empower the ordinary masses. Today we have a special guest. He's a Singaporean. His name is Darren Tay. He is the managing director of Public Speaking Academy. But more than that, why Darren is here, he is the world champion of Public Speaking 2016. Good morning, Darren.
Good morning.
Let's talk about this World Championship first, because where did it take place? How did it take place?
So this World Championship of Public Speaking is in fact an annual competition where we have about 142 countries and there are a total of 15,000 clubs worldwide. And each club would have representatives to represent their club and compete at different levels.
What made Singapore choose you? How did the process in Singapore take place? You represent Singapore.
Yes, correct. So there's actually a selection process whereby it starts at the club level, and after winning at the club, you move on to the area, the division, and eventually the national level. We call it the district level. So having won that, I represented Singapore to
How many people competed in Singapore?
How many people competed? Wow,
in Singapore?
I think easily several hundred.
Yeah.
Easily several hundred competed with me, and when we eventually moved on to the final level, which is the district level, there are about the top 10 speakers in Singapore, of which I managed to emerge as the champion.
Yeah, then you went to the World Championship.
Correct. Then I went to the United States, Washington DC. This time round it was held there. There are semi-finals and the grand finals.
Yeah, altogether you said about 30,000 in Washington or less?
Altogether all over the world. That means everyone started at club level and then they moved up eventually to the semi-finals.
That is how many countries were represented?
In total, there are 142 countries, and at the semi-finals, there were 98 speakers.
How did the selection process take place?
So for typical competition, you have to deliver a speech for 5 to 7 minutes and 30 seconds, and after which the judges, through a set of criteria, will decide how good a speaker is.
What is your topic?
My topic for the semi-finals would be to be able to observe the positivity in others instead of focusing on the negativity. And for my grand final speech, I talked about dealing with inner bullies, the negative thoughts, the inner demons within us.
So I'm sure our viewers are interested to listen to you about the positivity. Could you deliver that speech?
Oh, deliver,
make it, you could, how long was the speech? 6 minutes?
The speech was 7 minutes 30 seconds.
So we can cut it short for 3 minutes. I'm sure we all want to be positive.
Yeah,
let's hear it from you.
Oh, thank you. Perhaps I can give a very summarized version of the semi-final speech. So for the semi-final speech, I was very inspired by one of the professors who visited my law school where I studied. He took out a piece of paper, blank white piece of paper, and at the bottom there was a red dot. So he asked all of us, what do you see? And at that point in time we were thinking, oh, it's such a straightforward question, it's not a trick question. I see a red dot. So he asked further, what else do you see? Then we started thinking, oh, what else do we see? We don't see much except the red dot. Yeah. And it was at that point in time he made us understand the learning point at the end of the day, which was, as human beings, we tend to focus on the red dot a lot. We tend to focus on the negativity, the blemish in others. Yeah. We miss out the larger area of goodness, the larger area of white in others.
So that's the speech.
That was the main
we want
message.
to listen to the speech. Can you deliver the speech?
Well,
in 2 minutes. I'm sure that's what viewers are keen.
Perhaps
after all, we are with the world champion. World champion. So
yeah, I can't deliver the whole thing. Well, I
not
can.
the whole thing. Maybe for 2 minutes. They would want to see you speak.
Sure.
Here we go.
Well, I can give extract. Which one do you want to hear? The start, the middle, the finish?
Yeah, the start.
Okay, so the starting for the semi-final speech goes like this. I can recall vividly my high school English language teacher would use the 7 colors of the rainbow in the sky to teach us how to describe our emotions. Now, if someone were to say, I see green, the person is probably green with envy and hope to emulate a role model to attain the same level of success. If someone were to say, I see blue, now the person is probably feeling a sense of calmness, serenity, and tranquility. But if a person were to say, I see red, the person is probably feeling angry. And over the years as I grew older, I tend to see red most of the time. I don't know why. Even though I'm blessed with a job, an education, food, and clothes to wear, something was still missing in my life. I felt dissatisfied and not very happy. So let me paint you a picture of my typical day. At the start, in the morning, I would see my neighbor Joy, next door, watering the plants. I'll be dressed in a suit tie holding a briefcase, about to go to work. My neighbor Joy would ask me the silliest and most obvious of questions. She would look at me and she would ask, Hey Darren, going to work? I was thinking, that's so obvious. Wearing a suit tie holding a briefcase, where else could I be going? I really felt like telling her at some point in time, oh no, I'm not going to work, I'm going to your house. And there was once when my car had a flat tire, she said, Darren, flat tire? I really felt like telling her, oh no, the other 3, they're swollen. So you see, my friends, at the start of the day, I saw red. Not a very good start. So that is the starting portion for about 1 minute 30 seconds of my speech, and then I moved on to describe about different scenarios.
For the semi-finals?
Semi-finals, there were about 98 top speakers from all over the world who competed, and then they were split into 10 semi-final rounds. And then in the 10 semi-final rounds, each round, they can only emerge one champion.
What happened to those American speakers? How come a Singaporean beat all those American speakers? They talk all the time. There are a lot of talk shows. What happened to them?
Well, I think perhaps at the end of the day, it boils down to the speech message. So if you take a look at the trend, 2014, the champion was actually a Sri Lankan, Dhananjaya.
Darren, let's go for a short break and we'll be back with you in a moment.
Okay, sure.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukutali.
Welcome back to Newsline. Today we are privileged to have the world champion of public speaking, Darren Tay. Darren is also a lawyer and he has written a book, Express to Impress. Let's show it. So this is the book written by Darren. Now Darren, going through this, you talk of impromptu speeches, then you talk of using visual aids.
Correct.
But my question is, a lot of people fail trying to use visual aids.
Yeah.
What's the problem there? They test this, and when they try to deliver the speech, it packs up.
Correct.
What's the problem?
I think there are 2 main issues when it comes to visual aids that many speakers face. The first is a technical issue. That means whenever they try and click on a wireless presenter, the slides don't work. The other one, it's something that's more systemic, which is when they present, they tend to read off the slides, word for word. So now there's a disconnection there where the audience members simply just look at the slides and they're not so interested in the speaker anymore.
But why are people trying to depend so much on visual aids? I don't depend on visual aids. I think it's a waste of time. I mean, I like the old-fashioned way. But lots of them have failed trying to use visual aids.
Yeah. So right now, the reason why more and more
are they trying to cover up because they cannot speak or present well, or is it that?
I suppose it boils down to that maxim which says a picture paints 1,000 words, and I think a video paints 1,000,000 words. So many a times they try and within a short 30-second clip of video, they want to showcase a message very powerfully to the audience members. That's why we also have advertisement. But I suppose they do not necessarily have the right techniques to know how to maneuver from the visual aids to themselves as a speaker.
Or you need somebody to support them.
Yes, somebody to
Somebody
support
who really
them.
operates the machines.
Yes, so one to operate, or they themselves as a speaker, they need to be very consciously aware how to transit smoothly to the slides and then back to themselves again.
Yeah, but there is another issue with speakers, and especially politicians. They just don't understand the audience. If they are yawning, if they are falling asleep, they should cut short the speech.
Correct.
I don't know how it happens in Singapore. Here, lots of people don't understand. How is it? How do you see that situation?
So in those
Not
situations,
understanding the audience.
yeah. Audience understanding and audience awareness is extremely important. So it's important for us to judge and look at the audience's facial expression.
Eye
to find
contact,
out,
right?
Eye
Yeah.
contact, yes.
Yeah.
To find out whether or not they are disinterested or disconnected. And if so, either to tell a story to make a point, or if not, to perhaps shorten their speech and share the more succinct points across.
You attended the event in Sri Lanka, in Colombo yesterday. Were
Yes.
they all public speeches, or what was that about?
In the speech conference which I delivered in Colombo, Sri Lanka, basically I was the keynote speaker, and the many speakers there, they themselves are presenters, some of them trainers, some of them Toastmasters.
How were they doing? Did they talk too much?
Oh no, they're actually there to hear me talk.
Yeah, but then I know in Sri Lanka the compeers talk too much.
Oh.
They more than the speakers. Then take the vote of thanks, it becomes a speech. It's a simple way to say thank you.
I see.
What have you got to tell our viewers on that?
Well, I think
Sometimes vote of thanks and welcome speech is longer than the guest speaker's speech.
correct. So it's quite important to have the MCs or the compares to be very much aware and cognizant of the time, and more importantly to also find out that at the end of the day, it's really about trying to showcase the keynote speaker. Although I must add, my compare for that particular event did a very good job in introducing.
But what advice would you give to compeers who wants to show their colors? I have seen this in Sri Lanka, especially sad to say in the Sinhala and the Tamil medium. They talk more than, because the English language is easy, it's very short, it's easy to use. But in Sinhala and Tamil, they talk more than the speaker. What advice have you got to give them?
I think as compare or MC, the focus needs to change. Instead of focusing on themselves as MC or as compare, it is important to then shift to understand that the star at the end of the day would be the keynote speaker himself or herself.
Now, anyway, I have to tell the viewers, we are privileged to have the world champion of public speaking here. So you write about impromptu speeches.
Correct.
I want an impromptu speech here, Darren.
Sure, no problem. So, do you have a topic in mind or any topic?
It's up to you.
Okay. So, one good topic.
Politicians. That's my topic.
Oh, on politicians.
Yes, politicians.
Ah,
Give an impromptu
okay.
speech on politicians.
Sure. So I think politicians sometimes they have a huge struggle. Their struggle is how to deliver a good impromptu speech, and in particular, if there's a Q&A, how do you answer those questions with panache and very cogently? So there are several techniques involved when it comes to impromptu speech, and in fact, I'm doing an impromptu speech about impromptu speech. So there are a couple of techniques. I'll just share with you two main ones. The first one would be to be very aware of the key concept of telling a story and making a point, because we do know that facts tell, but stories sell at the end of the day. So many a times when we try and preach and share a lot of facts, give a lot of information, statistics or otherwise, audience members may tend to switch off because it's very dry or boring. So telling a very good story and crafting the message around it would help it be more acceptable by the audience members. The second technique for impromptu speaking, I would say, would be to have the PEEL structure. P stands for point, E stands for explanation, the next E stands for example, and the last L stands for link. So when you structure your speech in that way, it definitely helps the audience members to follow very easily. Because quite unlike reading a book, when it comes to public speaking, when you go and speak, sometimes audience members cannot rewind and go back to the previous point. So it's extremely crucial for you to be abundantly clear in your speech.
That's Darren Tay expressing to impress. Now let's talk about the humor in speeches. You write about humor in speech.
Sure.
Can you explain more about to our viewers? You should have humor all the time, or what sort of humor one should use?
Correct. I think when it comes to humor, it's quite important to use humor appropriately. So humor used appropriately can receive and achieve the effect of establishing rapport and connection with the audience members. So what are some of the key techniques in telling a humorous point? I wouldn't really call it a joke, for lack of a better term. More of a humorous point. And it can also be done in a business setting as well. The first one would be to share things perhaps in the form of 3, in triplets or in triads. So when you share it in 3, the third element you can actually derail from the audience member's expectation. So for example, you can say something like, oh, when I go for a military service, in my backpack, I will pack my toothbrush, I'll pack my clothes, and the last one you can derail and you can say, I pack my helper, my domestic helper or my maid. That would achieve some kind of
But
laughter.
what happened to the humor? Lots of people try to use humor, but the audience does not understand.
Yeah.
And they fail.
Correct. So there are 2 main important strategies involved. The first one would be, if you're not very sure of that humorous material and then you fear that you might bomb or fail in front of an audience, it is important for you to test it out. So my mentor, 2000 world champion of public speaking at Tate, said to test out before an audience. So a Toastmasters meeting is actually a very good way to test it out. And the second one would be, try, if let's say you don't get the intended laughter, just move on anyway. Avoid repeating the humor again, or after which say, oh, why are you guys not laughing? So it's important to just move on anyway.
And lots of speakers fail to understand that, Darren.
Correct, correct.
But now when you went for the finals, like what was your audience like? You delivered to just the judges or a huge audience?
So there were about 1,600 individuals in that ballroom, with many more watching worldwide live streamed, and there were several judges involved. Now the demographics of the audience members there were quite diverse, although admittedly the large majority of them are from the United States of America. So in the grand finals we had 10 finalists, 7 from USA, 1 from UK, 1 from Sri Lanka and 1 from Singapore.
Who was from Sri Lanka?
From Kaishika. Yeah, lovely lady.
How did she perform?
She performed very well. She was very confident, very poised. But what I really love about her was the kind of sportsmanship that she displayed. She was very, very generous, and more importantly, she wished all of us well with no ill intention whatsoever.
So how many males and how many females?
This time round it was quite balanced.
Yeah.
There were about 5 males and 5 females.
Who are better talkers, male or female?
I would say it's quite balanced in the sense that males, females, they each have their own strength. When it came to the female speakers, they were really good in able to hit the emotional chord within the audience members. And when it came to the males, I suppose it was a little bit more energetic, it was a bit more passionate in terms of the delivery, so each has their own strength.
Who continued and who stopped at the right time, males or females?
Sorry?
Who stopped at the correct time, males or females?
Stop at the correct time. I think it's quite balanced, because when it comes to humor, stopping before a punchline or punch word is important. And I think based on my observation, it's pretty much quite equal.
Darren, let's go for another short break.
Sure.
And we'll be back with you in a moment.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukutali.
Welcome back to Newsline. We are with Darren Tay, world champion of public speaking. Darren, about this your book, Express to Impress. Now you say how to enthrall, entertain and engage any audience. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. So for audience members, whether they are from a certain country or they have a particular background, it's really important for us to be aware of several concepts. One of which is for sure to understand where the audience members are coming from. And number 2 is to always place the audience members' interest at the number 1 spot. Many speakers make the mistakes of focusing on themselves, whether I've done well, whether I'll forget my lines, am I funny enough? But audience members should always come first.
Then we'd like to know more about you, talk of the key techniques of non-verbal communications.
Sure. So for non-verbal communication, many speakers, they are very interested in hand gesturing. So they would ask, how do you use your hands properly? Now there are a couple of techniques involved. When you're speaking on a huge stage, it is important for hand gestures to be further away from your body, because if it's too close, it makes you look very nervous, very tentative. The next thing to take note of is when you gesticulate, make sure your hands are not too low, below the belt, because it creates a huge distance between your hands and your face. The audience members have to decide whether to look at your face or your hands. Cannot be too high either, at your chest level because your shoulders would be raised. So the best part to gesticulate would be, of course, you drop the shoulders and somewhere at the belly button area. You can imagine yourself in a swimming pool with water up to your waist level and you gesticulate at that level.
And also there is another issue I think lots of people face, Darren. Now they like to have a podium that they want to cover themselves.
Correct.
Where they feel comfortable.
Yes.
What's the correct way? I mean, but everybody should be trained to speak without a podium, right?
Correct. So many a times I would also say that it depends on the situation. So if it's an award ceremony where you have the guest of honor, then we have a podium or lectern with several display in front, flowers. It will make the entire image look good. But when, say, you're a keynote speaker or when you're giving a seminar or a talk, it's always best to step out of the podium or away from the podium and engage with the entire stage. It's a technique called stage positioning, so the audience members don't see you as someone who is very afraid, just standing at one spot, but more importantly, the audience members would see you as someone who is very confident and able to work the stage.
But then also you have written about this being a master of ceremony. What advice have you got to give to people who aspire to be masters of ceremony in Sri Lanka?
I would say there are two main things to take note of. The first one would be very careful of some of the unforeseen circumstances. Because being a master of ceremony, or some may call it a compere or an MC, it's important for us to be able to react really fast on our feet. So coming and preempting the possible situations where things might arguably go wrong and coming up with the situations and the solutions to deal with it would help very much. And the last technique I would say for MCing would be, wherever possible, look through and rehearse your speech as often as possible. Knowing the flow would assist you very much. Even if, let's say, someone were to give you ideas or feedback through the earpiece, you can react spontaneously.
Now, we Sri Lankans speak fast, but Singaporean speaks faster. Did they understand you properly?
Yeah, so for example, my habit would be I tend to speak a little bit faster. That came perhaps from training as a debater and as a lawyer. We try and condense our content and deliver as much as possible either to the judge or to our adjudicators. But I've learned also to pace myself much better and wherever possible insert pauses in between so that the audience members can feel the impact of the speech.
Now this is something very interesting. You speak of the 5 greatest myths of public speaking. Will you tell our viewers about the 5 greatest myths of public speaking, how to face them?
Sure. One of the greatest myths of public speaking is many people think I have to be born talented in public speaking in order to be a good speaker. I would say that it's very often nurture over nature. It's all about the natural and it's all about the nurturing environment, my apologies, that helps to shape a powerful speaker. I did not start out the moment I was born as a world champion of public speaking. I started, in fact, as a very shy and diffident individual. And it took me several years of training and a turning point, a catalyst for me to ultimately be bold enough, confident enough to take the stage and take part in public speaking contest.
So I think you should cover much more. You have written more about myths. I think people have more questions. If you could explain further.
Definitely. The other myth would be many people feel, hey, why is it that I feel nervous every time
butterflies in the stomach? Yeah,
correct. Butterflies in the stomach. Is it possible to get rid of the butterflies in the stomach? My advice would be, and as many public speakers have also said, it's not possible to get rid of the butterflies in the stomach. But more importantly, is to make those butterflies fly in formation. We just have to change our relationship with stage anxiety as well as with nervousness. The best technique to do it would be, before going on stage, you can use power poses. High power poses like this, for example, we call it the rock star pose, to increase surface area of the body. You can do it in private for 1 or 2 minutes. Or alternatively, you can make use of proper breathing techniques. Focus on the physical sensation of the body and be able to feel calmer before you go on stage.
I've read that the great speakers like Winston Churchill used to go in front of the mirror and rehearse and practice.
Correct.
How do you do?
In fact, going in front of a mirror is a good technique, especially when you want to observe your facial expression and your hand gestures. Now with technology, we have something called the iPhone, or we have smartphones with a camera function. We also have video cameras. So my advice would be, if possible, instead of just simply relying on the mirror alone, video record your performance. The benefit comes in two folds. The first one, if you relook at your video recording, you'll be able to give it to a mentor and ask your mentor for advice. The second one would be, when you have your back faced the mirror or face the video camera, all those can actually be captured on tape. So it's important for you to invest in a video camera so you can play it back and evaluate your performance along the way.
Now let's talk about the 10 habits of highly effective public speakers.
Sure. I think the 10 habit, the one important habit would be rehearse, rehearse, and rehearse. Rehearsals are extremely important because the moment you get more familiar with the material, the moment you have internalized the material, no matter which part of the stage you stand, you'll be able to speak very comfortably. Now, it's important to note that when you rehearse, it's not just looking at a script and memorizing it. It is important for you to note that in rehearsals, try and get a live audience to test out your speech or get a mentor so that you will not be repeating the bad habits. You'll be instead looking at what are some of the good habits to continue.
That's one. Let's talk about others.
Sure. The next habit of highly effective public speakers would be, in order for you to engage the audience members, as I've mentioned earlier, tell a story and make a point, because we know stories sell but facts tell. That's a very powerful technique. And another habit I would like to share would be to have a word bank, a phrase bank, and a humor bank. Because whenever we walk on the streets or whenever we go through our daily conversations, we might spot an important message. And it's easier to pen it down rather than just to remember it, because the faintest pencil mark is better than the best of memories.
Who is the best speaker in the world today? Apart from Darren Tay, right? Who's the best speaker in the world?
In fact, I would say everyone can be a best speaker, but if you ask me to identify a very good speaker, a mentor, I would say my mentor, the year 2000 world champion of public speaking. I can come up with other few names like
the politicians. Let's look at
politician. I would say Singapore, we had a politician, the late Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, who is actually a very powerful speaker. We also have the United States President Barack Obama, who's able to speak well. Bill Clinton as well, in his prime, he was also able to speak with such gusto. And
what about Donald Trump?
Donald
Trump, a good speaker.
Well, I would say he's confident on stage. Just looking at the style alone, I'm not focusing on the content. Just looking at the style alone, I would say that he's confident enough of his own point, whatever the point may be, and however much it makes sense. It depends on the individual. But yeah, he does have that style.
Thank you very much, Darren Tay, for joining us, and we wish you all the best during your stay in Sri Lanka.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we'll meet you again tomorrow.
Newsfirst Newsline with